Imagine for a second that someone, knocks on your front door right now.
Okay.
You open it. And standing on your porch is a courier, and they're holding this beautifully wrapped box. It's got your name on it.
Oh, I like where this is going.
Right. And somehow you just know that inside this box is exactly what you've always wanted, like the ultimate gift.
The dream delivery.
Exactly. The thing that will solve your deepest anxieties, secure your future, and just bring you absolute peace.
Wow, okay.
But right as you reach out your hands to take it, the courier holds up a finger and says, wait, there is one condition.
Of course there is.
Yeah, they say you can only keep this gift if you immediately figure out a way to give it away to someone else.
Man, that is, it's a complete paradox, isn't it?
It totally.
It goes against literally every instinct we have about receiving something of immense value. Think about human nature.
Oh, yeah.
When we get something precious, our immediate biological and psychological instinct is to hoard it.
Right, we want to protect it.
Exactly. We put a padlock on it, stick it on a high shelf in the house where only we can see it, and make sure nobody else can, touch it.
We build fences around our blessings, but in this scenario, if you hoard it, you lose it. The box just, poof, disappears.
That's a fascinating setup.
You only activate the true intended value of the gift by becoming a channel for it. By, passing it on to your neighbor or a stranger or the rest of the world.
And as wild and counterintuitive as that sounds, that exact dynamic is basically the blueprint for the entire globe's future.
It really is. It is the central beating heart of what is, well, arguably the greatest rescue mission in human history.
Yeah, today we are looking at an ancient promise, a promise made to one very specific, very flawed man, living essentially in the middle of nowhere.
Thousands of years ago.
Right, thousands of years ago. And we are going to trace how that singular, almost microscopic promise was meticulously designed to scale up.
From the very first syllable, right?
Exactly. Meticulously designed to scale up and cover every single family on the face of the earth.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because we've got a really fascinating stack of research in front of us today for this deep dive.
We really do.
We're looking at a comprehensive theological document titled The Covenant of Blessing, God Promises Blessing to All Nations by Chris R. Velasquez.
A very detailed text.
Incredibly detailed. And alongside that, we have these 3 amazing visual infographics that essentially map out this grand narrative in data and charts.
And the core tension we are looking at today, the thread tying all of this together, is this concept of election and blessing.
Right.
The sources make a compelling argument right out of the gate. They say election is a vocation, not a privilege.
A vocation.
Yeah, a job. It is that beautifully wrapped box you only get to keep if you give it away.
And that framework is so vital because it completely shatters how we usually use the word blessing today.
Oh, absolutely.
Think about it. If you open any social media app right now and search the hashtag blessed, what are you going to see?
A brand new sports car.
Yep.
A promotion at work.
Yeah.
Or somebody sitting on a beach in Bali with a ridiculously expensive smoothie.
Exactly. It's entirely inward-facing. It's highly consumerist. It's all about what I have acquired for my own comfort.
But the source material immediately strips that modern superficial definition away.
It really does.
It argues that biblical blessing, the original kind of blessing, is fundamentally outward-facing.
Meaning what, exactly?
The logic is that God blesses one man in order to bless the many. He chooses a single family for the explicit purpose of gathering all the nations.
So to understand how this ancient blessing actually reaches you, sitting right there in your car or at your desk or walking your dog while listening to this deep dive, we can't just start with the promise itself.
Right, we actually have to go all the way back to the beginning.
We need to understand what this blessing even was in its purest form. And frankly, how the human race managed to completely lose it in the first place.
Yeah, to understand the cure, you have to understand the disease.
That makes sense.
And to understand the disease, you have to know what a healthy body looked like. So our sources point us straight to Genesis chapter 1.
The creation of the world.
Exactly. And the text explicitly points out that blessing wasn't some later addition. It wasn't a patch applied after things went wrong.
Oh, I see.
Blessing was the original operating system of the universe.
The original operating system. I love that phrasing.
It's a great analogy.
Because if you look at the text, God creates humanity to reflect his glory, and the very first thing he does is bless them.
Right. In Genesis 1.22 and 1.28.
Yeah, he commands them to be fruitful and multiply. The author makes a huge point here. He says God is generous.
He is not a stingy deity sitting in the clouds, reluctantly handing out little crumbs of goodness.
He rejoices in abundance. He wired the universe for flourishing.
Humanity was created to live under God's favor, in perfect communion with him, and their job was to steward the earth.
To cultivate it.
Exactly. To take the raw materials of the Garden of Eden and build a thriving, harmonious world.
That was the baseline reality.
That was how the operating system was designed to function. But then, as the text outlines, we hit what we can call the Great Fracture.
The fall. Genesis chapter 3. And this isn't just a minor glitch.
No, not at all.
This is a catastrophic system failure.
It is. Sin enters the world, and that beautiful open communion between God and humanity is completely shattered.
Just broken.
And pay attention to the mechanics of what happens here. The blessing of Genesis 1 isn't just paused or temporarily suspended.
Wait, what happens to it?
It is aggressively reversed. It becomes a curse.
What does that actually mean functionally? Reversed into a curse. Because we throw the word curse around like it's a magic spell in a fairy tale.
Right, like Sleeping Beauty. Functionally, it means the mechanisms of flourishing are replaced by the mechanisms of decay.
Okay, so it's structural.
Very structural. Instead of effortless fruitfulness, you have sorrow, toil, and pain.
The ground itself pushes back against human effort.
Exactly. Instead of eternal life and communion, you have physical death and spiritual alienation.
So the operating system is now infected with a virus.
A virus that touches every single line of code. And importantly, this infection doesn't just stay localized to Adam and Eve.
It spreads.
It spreads and it mutates.
Which brings us to Genesis 11, Babel.
Yeah, a massive turning point.
This is such a fascinating case study in how far the system had degraded. Because you have the human family, post-fall, gathering together.
But they aren't gathering to steward the earth or reflect God's glory.
No, they're gathering in absolute concentrated pride.
They decide to build a massive tower to the heavens to make a name for themselves, entirely apart from God.
Babel is the ultimate expression of human autonomy gone toxic.
It's humanity saying, we don't need the Creator's blessing, we will manufacture our own significance.
Wow.
And the result of Babel is judgment. God confuses their language, and there is a global scattering.
The nations are fractured.
The world is alienated, not just from God, but from each other. And the document we are analyzing points out something crucial here. Humanity at this point isn't just morally weak. We are spiritually disordered.
I'm stuck on something here, though.
Okay, what is it?
If creation was already blessed and God is all-powerful, why did he need to invent a highly specific, localized covenant later on?
That's a really common question.
If we stick with our tech analogy, is this new covenant of blessing like God saying, okay, Windows 95 is completely busted, I'm going to wipe the hard drive and write a brand new software program from scratch? Or is this something else?
It's absolutely something else, and that distinction is vital.
Okay.
It is much more like God plugging in a highly specialized, heavy-duty recovery drive into a crashed system.
A recovery drive.
Yeah. The author, Chris Velasquez, is very clear on this. The Abrahamic covenant does not discard, replace, or overwrite the original creation.
It's not a do-over.
No, it is designed to heal and reorient it. It is God's redemptive recovery of the exact same blessing he intended from the very beginning.
Because the world at Babel is entirely fractured into diverse warring nations, the ultimate solution has to eventually scale up to heal that entire global human family.
Exactly. The scope of the problem demands a global solution.
But that is exactly what is so confusing about God's initial strategy here. The system is globally crashed. You've got warring factions, scattered nations, complete spiritual disorder across the entire map.
Right.
And God's response to this massive macro-level crisis is incredibly micro.
Very micro.
He doesn't respond with a sweeping, spectacular wave of the hand to just rewrite human nature instantly.
Yeah.
He zooms in on one specific, highly unlikely guy.
Yes. We arrive at Genesis 12. And this is the hinge upon which the entire rest of human history swings.
The turning point.
God calls a man named Abram, later Abraham, out of his homeland in Ur, which is in ancient Mesopotamia, and makes him a promise.
So God picks this one guy out of a crowd. Does the text actually specify what the deal is? What exactly is he promising this nomad?
He gives him a multi-layered promise, and the phrasing is incredibly precise. Genesis 12, verses 1 through 3.
What does it say?
God essentially gives Abram 3 distinct promises. First, I will bless you. Second, you will be a blessing. And finally, the capstone, in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed.
Looking at the first infographic from our sources, it's this really cool data map titled The Blessing by the Numbers.
Yeah, that chart is great.
There is a fascinating breakdown of this exact moment. It points out that while this covenant contains those three specific promises, it has exactly one global purpose.
God's glory among all peoples.
Right. Three promises, one purpose.
And if we look at the mechanics of those three promises,
Mm-hmm.
we see the grammar of the covenant. It's all about movement.
Movement. Explain that.
It starts with divine initiative, God reaching out to Abram when Abram wasn't looking for him. Then it passes through Abraham.
Like a conduit.
Exactly. And its final destination is the nations. It moves from the singular, one man, to the universal, all families.
Okay, let's make this concrete. This means Abraham is essentially acting like a conduit, not a reservoir. To use a plumbing analogy, he's the pipe, not the holding tank.
That is the perfect way to look at it.
The water of the blessing isn't meant to pool up around his ankles so he can live a comfortable life. It's meant to flow through him with high pressure to irrigate the rest of the desert.
That is precisely the mechanism.
Yeah.
And that is why the definition of blessing here is so important.
How does the text define it?
The text clarifies that blessing in Scripture means God's favor, his life-giving presence, covenantal goodness, and fruitful flourishing under his rule.
So it's not just money.
No, it definitely has material dimensions. I mean, Abraham does become wealthy in livestock and servants, but at its core, it is deeply relational.
The relationship is the blessing.
The deepest blessing is actually a restored relationship with God and participating actively in his massive saving purpose.
It's a vocational calling.
Exactly.
It's not God handing Abram a winning lottery ticket so he can retire to a beach in Canaan.
Or from it.
And there's this great comparison in the infographic data called Abraham Then and Now that really puts this vocational calling into perspective for you and me today.
I love that section. Walk us through that comparison. How does the source map Abraham's life onto a modern listener?
Okay, so let's look at Abraham back then. First, he left his home and his extended family by faith.
Right, a huge sacrifice.
Second, he lived in tents as a sojourner. He didn't build a permanent castle.
Always on the move.
Third, he waited for a promise that he couldn't see. Fourth, he built altars of worship wherever he went.
Yeah.
And fifth, the text says he looked forward to a city with foundations built by God.
So that's the ancient context.
Now mirror that with what the source says about believers today who inherit this exact same blessing. We are called to leave our idols and self-reliance.
That's the modern equivalent of leaving Ur.
Exactly. We are called to live as strangers or pilgrims in this world, to place our hope in a future inheritance, to worship God anywhere, not just in one specific temple, and to look forward to the new heaven and new earth.
What's fascinating about that data set is the continuity of the posture.
The posture, yeah.
Abraham was nomadic. He didn't settle down, build a massive fortress, and say, look at my blessed empire. He lived in tents.
Temporary structures.
He understood intuitively that the blessing wasn't about anchoring himself to material luxury. It was about moving dynamically with God's purpose.
He was beta testing the global patch.
He really was. And that same nomadic, forward-looking posture is required of anyone who claims this blessing today.
The text actually cites Philippians 3.20 to back this up.
Yes, the idea that our true citizenship is in heaven. We are supposed to be traveling light.
But wait, hold on. I'm looking at this structurally, and there is a massive, glaring vulnerability in this plan.
Oh, but what's the vulnerability?
Human beings are mortal.
Right.
Abraham is just a guy. He is going to age, his cells are going to degrade, and he is going to die.
It's true.
If this entire cosmic rescue plan, this global recovery drive, hinges on a mortal nomad, isn't God putting all his eggs in a very fragile basket? What happens when Abraham stops breathing? Does the blessing die with him?
That is the exact tension the narrative wants you to feel.
I'm feeling it.
And the answer introduces us to the mechanism of generational continuity.
Okay.
The promise doesn't die with Abraham because the covenant is not ultimately dependent on Abraham's physical longevity or his moral perfection.
So what is it dependent on?
It is anchored in God's faithfulness as the guarantor of the contract.
So the beta tester changes, but the software developer is the same.
Exactly. We see this play out with the patriarchs. God comes to Abraham's son, Isaac, in Genesis 26, and explicitly reaffirms the exact same parameters.
Word for word.
Almost. He says, in your offspring, all the nations of the earth shall be blessed.
Wow.
Then Isaac has a son, Jacob. And Genesis 28, in a dream, God tells Jacob the exact same thing. The promise transfers seamlessly down the family line.
But let me push back here, because if you actually read the stories of Isaac and Jacob, I mean, these are not perfect guys.
Not even close.
Didn't they mess up constantly? Jacob literally means deceiver. He steals his brother's birthright. His family is a mess of jealousy and betrayal.
Complete dysfunction.
How does a holy promise survive a family tree that dysfunctional?
You're hitting on a profound theological point that the source material emphasizes. The human actors are deeply, deeply flawed.
It's almost comical how flawed they are.
It is. The text explicitly points out that this promise has to survive barrenness, deception, intense internal family conflict, and eventually centuries of slavery and exile in Egypt.
That is a lot of stress testing for one promise.
But the divine promise remains stable because God binds himself by an oath. The mechanism of the covenant relies on God's grace, not human merit.
That becomes even more obvious when this family scales up into a full-blown nation, because they go from being a wandering family to the nation of Israel.
Yes, and the text cites Deuteronomy chapter 7 to explain why Israel was chosen.
Why were they chosen?
God tells them directly, I didn't choose you because you were the biggest or the strongest or the most morally pure nation on earth.
So no merit.
None. He says, I chose you simply because I loved you and because I am keeping the oath I swore to your ancestors.
It is election by pure grace.
But, and this is the critical part, they are chosen to be a mirror. They are meant to reflect God's holiness and justice to the watching nations around them.
That phrase, the watching nations, is so important.
It really is.
Because I think there is a very common stereotype today that the Old Testament is highly exclusive.
Oh, absolutely.
That it's just the hyper-localized history of one specific ethnic tribe in the Middle East, and God doesn't care about anyone else until the New Testament.
Which is a complete misunderstanding.
Totally. Our sources completely demolish that idea. The infographics highlight a really staggering statistic that stopped me in my tracks.
The one about the nations.
Yeah. There are over 200 references to the nations included throughout the Bible. Over 200.
The global scope is embedded in the DNA of the text. You just have to know to look for it.
Where else do we see it?
The expert document highlights Psalm 67 as a prime example.
Okay.
The psalmist prays for God to be gracious and bless them, and to make his face shine upon them. But listen to the mechanism of why he asks for this blessing.
Why does he ask?
He says that your way may be known on earth, your saving power among all nations. The internal blessing is meant to produce a global revelation.
It's the conduit again, bless us, so that the rest of the earth can see how good you are.
Exactly.
And the prophets take this even further. Look at Isaiah 49:6, where God says to Israel, it is too light a thing that you should be my servant to raise up the tribes of Jacob.
It's too small a task.
Right. He says, I will make you as a light for the nations, that my salvation may reach to the end of the earth. It is never at any point meant to be a closed loop.
The theological term the author uses here is that the promise is eschatologically expansive.
Okay, let's translate that for the listener who hasn't been to seminary.
Fair enough. Eschatological just refers to the ultimate end goal, the final state of things.
Okay, end goal.
And expansive means it grows. So saying the promise is eschatologically expansive means that the final end-of-history goal of this covenant is massive, universal, and all-encompassing.
It starts as a seed, but it is destined to become a forest that covers the globe.
Beautifully said. Yes.
Okay, so if the prophets are pushing the horizon outward, demanding that Israel act as a light to the nations, we run into a major mechanical problem.
We do. Israel keeps failing.
They end up in exile. They succumb to the very idols they were supposed to be a light against.
Over and over again.
So how does an ancient, struggling ethnic identity actually transition into a global, universal reality? How does the curse of Genesis 3 actually get broken? Because clearly this nation couldn't pull it off on their own.
And they were never meant to. The nation was the vehicle, but the ultimate mechanism to break the curse wasn't a collective group of people.
It was a single person.
It was. And this is where the narrative takes a profound, paradoxical pivot.
We are talking about the arrival of the Messiah, Jesus.
Yes.
The text points us straight into the New Testament, specifically to the writings of the Apostle Paul in his letter to the Galatians.
Galatians chapter 3.
Right. And Paul makes a fascinating laser-focused argument in chapter 3. He explicitly names Jesus as the singular promised seed of Abraham.
He focuses on the grammar of the original promise.
He really does. Galatians 3:16 says the promises were made to Abraham and to his offspring. It doesn't say offsprings plural, referring to many, but singular, referring to one, which is Christ.
This is a decisive foundational moment in our deep dive.
How so?
The covenant of blessing isn't just pointing towards some vague era of general moral reform or gradual cultural improvement.
Right.
It is pointing specifically and relentlessly to Jesus of Nazareth. He is the true Israel.
He is the ultimate beta tester who actually runs the code perfectly.
Exactly. He is the true seed through whom the blessing will finally flow to the nations.
But the way he actually delivers this blessing is entirely counterintuitive.
It really is.
It violates every expectation of how a victorious king should operate. The source document calls the cross the paradoxical center of the covenant.
Paradoxical is the perfect word.
It references Galatians 3:3 and 14, which says that Christ became a curse for us, so that the blessing of Abraham might come to the Gentiles.
We need to spend some time here, because to understand how this works, we have to look at the mechanics of what theologians call substitutionary atonement.
Okay, let's break that down.
This is the absolute crux of the theology presented in the sources. The logic here is that the blessing of God doesn't just casually skip over the judgment of sin.
Right.
God doesn't just wave a magic wand, lower his standard of absolute holiness, and say, you know what, let's just forget about that whole Babel and Genesis 3 thing. Water under the bridge.
Right, and I want to genuinely play devil's advocate for the listener here, because this is a massive sticking point for a lot of modern readers.
All right.
If this entire covenant, this whole concept of blessing we've been tracking for thousands of years, is all about life, flourishing, favor, and the reversal of death, it seems completely contradictory.
Sounds absurd.
Yeah, almost absurd that the climax of this blessing is a brutal, bloody execution on a Roman cross.
It's a huge stumbling block for many.
How in the world does a violent death equate to a blessing? Make that make sense.
It's a brilliant question, and it goes to the very heart of what the author calls the logic of grace.
The logic of grace.
We have to go back to the mechanism of the great fracture we talked about in Genesis 3.
The virus in the operating system.
Exactly. The fall didn't just introduce bad habits or negative thinking. It introduced a literal objective curse.
A structural...
A state of spiritual and physical death that humanity was trapped under. Think of it like a massive, unpayable cosmic debt.
Okay.
Because humanity was under this curse, the only way to recover the blessing of Genesis 1 was for someone to actually deal with the debt.
So you can't just paint over rot in a house and call it fixed.
No, you can't.
You have to tear out the wood, remove the rot, and bear the cost of the repair.
Exactly. The rot has to be dealt with structurally. The blessing has to pass through the cross. Let me use a different analogy.
Let's hear it.
Think of a lightning rod on a tall building during a massive thunderstorm.
Okay.
The storm represents the righteous justice of God against the rebellion and rot of sin. The building is humanity.
Right.
If the lightning strikes the building, it burns to the ground. But the lightning rod steps in, stands higher than the building, and intentionally absorbs the full lethal voltage of the strike.
It takes the hit.
It takes the hit so the building can remain safe.
So Jesus is the lightning rod.
Precisely. Jesus, as the perfectly righteous Savior, steps in and absorbs the curse in our place. He becomes the curse bearer.
Wow.
The document puts it beautifully. It says the nations are not blessed by God lowering his holiness, but by God providing a righteous and atoning Savior who bears the curse in their place.
The debt is paid.
The lightning has struck. The curse is exhausted.
That is incredibly heavy, but it makes the architecture of this entire narrative suddenly snap into focus.
It really connects the dots.
Because if the cross is the mechanism that finally breaks the curse, then the bottleneck is cleared.
The floodgates are thrown wide open.
Exactly. The promise that was bottled up in one nomadic man in Genesis 12 now has the kinetic energy to rush outward and engulf the entire world.
Which brings us to the rollout phase.
Yeah.
If the cross is the massive system update that fixes the bug, how does that update actually get downloaded to the rest of the network?
We get to what the text calls the reversal of Babel.
The huge, huge moment.
If you recall, Babel was the moment in Genesis 11 where humanity was scattered and divided by language and confusion.
A complete breakdown in communication.
Yeah. The New Testament gives us the exact mirror opposite moment in Acts chapter 2. The day of Pentecost.
Pentecost is a fascinating mechanism. Because what happens?
Well, the followers of Jesus are gathered in Jerusalem, right?
Yeah, and the Holy Spirit descends on them. And suddenly, they begin speaking in completely different languages.
But look at how the Holy Spirit interacts with human language here.
It's brilliant.
At Babel, diverse languages were deployed as a judgment to stop arrogant humanity from cooperating on a toxic project.
They couldn't understand each other, so they scattered.
But at Pentecost, it's the exact inverse. The crowds in Jerusalem are from all over the known world: Parthians, Medes, Egyptians, Romans.
A huge diversity of people.
And they all hear the disciples declaring the mighty works of God in their own distinct native languages.
So the linguistic diversity isn't erased, but the confusion is healed.
Exactly. The communication barrier is breached by grace.
It's the anti-Babel. The gospel enters this fractured, scattered world and immediately begins to heal the divisions, not by making everyone speak one language, but by translating the blessing into every language.
And Peter, the lead disciple, preaches a massive sermon to this bewildered crowd at Pentecost.
And look at how he concludes it in Acts 3.25.
He ties it all back.
He makes the direct, explicit connection to the blueprint. He quotes the Abrahamic covenant to them.
Yeah.
He says, "You are the sons of the covenant," saying to Abraham, "and in your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed."
He is literally telling them the box is open. The gift is here.
Yeah.
The promise made to the nomad thousands of years ago is happening right now, in your ears.
And the result is the birth of the church.
The church becomes the living, breathing proof of the covenant's universal scope.
It is designed to be a multinational, multi-ethnic people, formed not by bloodline or geography, but by faith in the true seed, Jesus.
The Apostle Paul writes about this extensively in his letter to the Ephesians, right? Chapter 2.
He does. He talks about how the dividing walls of hostility, the ancient, bitter cultural hatred between Jews and Gentiles, are literally broken down and abolished in the flesh of Christ.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting for me. When we look at the ultimate end of this story, the eschatological horizon, as we defined earlier.
The final state.
If we fast forward to the very end of the Bible, to the book of Revelation, chapters 7 and 21, we are given a vision of what this beta test finally looks like when it is rolled out globally and perfectly.
John the Revelator sees a vision of a vast, unquantifiable multitude standing before the throne of God.
And he specifically notes that they are from every nation.
From all tribes and peoples and languages.
We really need to pause on this concept, which the author refers to as redeemed plurality.
It's one of the core foundational principles laid out in the infographics in the text.
What is it exactly?
That God's ultimate plan does not destroy human diversity. He redeems it.
This is such a critical point for you, the listener, to absorb. Think about how often we picture eternity or heaven.
The popular cultural stereotype.
Yeah, this floating, boring, incredibly uniform place. Everyone is sitting on a cloud wearing the exact same pristine white robe, playing a harp, singing the same note for 10,000 years.
It's a flattened, homogenized sameness.
It honestly sounds exhausting, but the text argues the exact opposite.
The final state of the universe depicted in Revelation is not racially narrow. It is not culturally monochrome.
Right.
Revelation 21 specifically says, "The kings of the earth will bring their glory into it, and they will bring into it the glory and the honor of the nations."
What does that mean?
It means God created diverse cultures, different languages, unique art, and human distinctiveness on purpose.
It wasn't an accident.
No, sin corrupted those things and turned them into weapons of racism and nationalism. But redemption doesn't erase the diversity. It cleanses it. It heals it.
The final picture is reconciled plurality under one Lord.
The ultimate fulfillment of the promise to Abraham isn't that everyone on earth becomes a genetic clone of a Middle Eastern nomad.
Thank goodness.
It's a brilliantly diverse tapestry of human distinctiveness, finally functioning exactly the way it was designed to in Genesis 1.
The operating system is fully restored, but now it's running on 1 billion different unique devices in perfect harmony.
Which is a staggeringly beautiful vision.
It is.
But because we still live in the tension between Pentecost and Revelation, it is also a vision that is incredibly easily lost, corrupted, or hijacked by human beings.
Yeah, we have a tendency to mess things up.
And the source material is very careful not to just give us the high theology, but to provide very practical theological guardrails for right now.
Right. We need to talk about the dangers, the pitfalls, because if this is the grand design, why do we so often get the concept of blessing so catastrophically wrong today?
It's a great question. The infographics lay out these core principles juxtaposed against the common dangers to avoid.
And I think we should tackle these in pairs because contrasting the truth with the counterfeit really clarifies what this covenant is and, just as importantly, what it is not.
Let's start with the first pair, true versus false blessing.
Okay.
The core principle from the text is that the Abrahamic covenant provides a full spectrum blessing.
Full spectrum.
As we see in Galatians 3 and Romans 4, this true blessing includes justification by faith, the reception of the Holy Spirit, right standing before a holy God, and a guaranteed future inheritance in the new creation.
It is deeply spiritual and eternally secure.
That is the true blessing. The danger, the counterfeit, false blessing, is reducing this magnificent cosmic covenant to mere material prosperity.
To financial success, physical health, or personal ease.
It's the prosperity gospel trap.
Like we mentioned earlier, the text is delightfully blunt about this. Abraham lived in tents, not luxury condos. He was a nomad.
Exactly.
If you reduce the covenant of the creator of the universe to just getting a bigger bank account, you make it incredibly fragile and superficial.
And if you do that, you fundamentally misunderstand the purpose of what you've been given. Which brings us to the second pair.
True versus false election.
The true biblical principle is that election serves mission. God chooses in order to send.
Those who receive the blessing are obligated to become channels of that blessing to others.
The pipe, not the holding tank.
And the false danger here is treating election as a privilege without responsibility. The text warns that blessing without mission becomes stagnation.
It's a Dead Sea.
Water flows into the Dead Sea, but nothing flows out, so the water becomes hypersaline and toxic.
If you think you were chosen by God just so you can sit comfortably on a couch, feel spiritually superior to everyone else, and wait for heaven, you have completely misunderstood the assignment.
You took the box from the courier and locked the door.
Exactly. And this attitude of superiority often bleeds into how we view other cultures, which brings us to the third pair.
True versus false unity.
The true biblical vision, as we just discussed with Revelation, is that nations are redeemed, not erased.
The diversity of the human family is healed and gathered together in unified worship.
And the danger, the false unity, is flattening the nations into cultural uniformity.
The text specifically warns the modern church to distinguish true gospel unity from cultural imperialism.
You don't have to abandon your redeemed cultural identity, your language, or your heritage to be part of the covenant.
The gospel doesn't demand that an African believer or an Asian believer adopt Western cultural norms to be a good Christian.
It demands allegiance to Christ, not assimilation to a specific human culture.
And finally, the fourth pair addresses the ultimate orientation of our hearts. True versus false focus.
The true blessing is inherently theocentric. It is God-centered.
It exists ultimately to display God's infinite glory and grace among all the nations.
It is not first and foremost about our comfort. It is about His grace being made known.
The danger is making the blessing completely anthropocentric, self-referential, treating ancient theology purely as a modern self-improvement tool.
I like to think of it this way. Modern self-help culture, where every blessing or positive mindset shift ends with me feeling better, achieving my goals, or maximizing my potential, is ultimately a dead-end street.
It terminates on you.
But the biblical blessing is a massive multi-lane highway. It's meant to transport grace through your life, right past your own ego, to other people who are desperate for it.
If you lose sight of that highway, and if you disconnect the Old Testament narrative from the gospel of Jesus, you create a deeply distorted view of faith.
The document we're studying argues forcefully that Genesis 12 is actually the first great announcement of the gospel.
Wait, really?
Yeah. God telling Abraham, "In you all families will be blessed," isn't a separate, outdated religious track from what Jesus did on the cross. It is the very architectural foundation of it.
Any reading of the Bible that pits the mean, exclusive Old Testament against the nice, inclusive New Testament entirely misses the beautiful, seamless unity of this redemptive history.
Okay, so understanding the theology, the mechanisms of the cross, and these specific dangers is incredibly important.
But let's bring this all the way down to the ground level.
Let's do it.
How does a 4,000-year-old promise made to a nomad in the Mesopotamian desert actually alter the way you, the listener, live your life tomorrow morning at 8 a.m.?
The practical implications. The author of our source document doesn't leave this in the realm of abstract theory.
He provides very clear, piercing directives for Christian life, for leadership, and for global mission.
The sources have this really powerful, concise summary phrase for the believer's core identity. It says, "We are blessed by grace, sent by grace, heirs by promise."
Let's break that down practically.
Okay.
If a listener is a university student studying engineering, or a mid-level manager at a logistics firm, or a stay-at-home parent wrangling toddlers, How do they actively practice being a conduit of this global covenant in their mundane, often exhausting daily routine?
It starts internally, with personal holiness and gratitude. The text makes a sharp distinction. It says that believers are heirs of promise, not consumers of religious goods.
Think about the difference.
Consumers evaluate every relationship, every church, every experience based entirely on what they get out of it. Did this meet my needs? Did I like the music? Was this convenient for me?
But heirs,
Heirs recognize they have been grafted into a massive ancient legacy that they did not earn.
and that realization requires a response of obedience, deep gratitude, and a holy life.
The blessed life is never an excuse for self-indulgence or moral laziness.
It changes your default posture from what can I extract to what can I contribute.
And when it comes to leadership, whether you're leading a boardroom, a small group, or a family, the implications are huge.
The source explicitly states that resources, power, and influence are given by God for service, not for private accumulation.
Which means the metrics for success completely change.
Success shouldn't just be measured by how big your own internal group gets or how much profit your division made, but by missional fruitfulness.
The question a leader has to ask is, are you sending people out?
Are you equipping them to bless the broader community?
Are you using your influence to advocate for the vulnerable, just as God reached down to rescue a vulnerable humanity?
What does this look like for the parent wrangling toddlers?
The expert document specifically mentions the importance of building covenant families.
Covenant families.
That means intentionally teaching and modeling this outward-facing face for the next generation. It means your dinner table isn't just a place to consume calories, it's a place to practice hospitality.
Engaging the world with radical hospitality, inviting the lonely in, demonstrating mercy, that is actively participating in the exact same promise God made to Abraham.
And on a macro level, it anchors the entire concept of global mission.
Evangelism, church planting, Bible translation, mercy ministries.
Sometimes we look at these things as modern inventions or just church marketing strategies to get more members. But the text argues that these activities arise directly, organically, from Genesis 12.
The church does not invent its global scope in a boardroom. It inherits it from the ancient blueprint.
The nations matter to the church because God explicitly said they matter to him. From the very first chapters of the Bible, long before the cross, the end goal was always a reconciled global family.
Okay, we have covered an immense, staggering amount of ground today. We've gone from the dawn of creation to the end of time.
It's been quite a journey.
Let's do a quick final synthesis to tie all these threads together for the listener.
The through line is clear. We started with an original blessing at creation, the operating system where God designed humanity to flourish, steward the earth, and reflect his glory.
That blessing was tragically lost, infected by a virus, and reversed into a curse at the fall, which eventually led to the arrogant scattering of humanity at Babel.
The system crashed. Then God initiates the recovery drive. He steps into history, chooses a single, unlikely nomad named Abraham, and promises that through his specific family line, every single family on earth will ultimately be blessed.
He creates a conduit.
That fragile promise survives the messy, flawed patriarchs. It scales up to a nation meant to be a light, it expands through the visions of the prophets, and it is finally permanently secured by Jesus Christ.
He is the true seed who steps in as the lightning rod, absorbing the curse of the fall on the cross.
And because that curse is finally broken, the blessing explodes outward at Pentecost, the anti-Babel.
It creates a multinational, multi-ethnic church, flowing through history and culminating in a brilliantly diverse new creation.
The text beautifully references the prophet Habakkuk 2.14 to describe this final breathtaking state. For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea.
It is, without a doubt, the ultimate story of God's relentless, unstoppable grace, moving from one man in the desert to all nations across eternity.
Which brings us right back to your front porch.
To that knock on your door and that gift currently resting in your hands.
We've seen how God used the sprawling timeline of human history to turn one man's faith into a global, cosmic rescue mission.
But think about your own life right now. Think about your specific sphere of influence, your workplace, your neighborhood, your family, your group chat.
If the divine rule of this universe is that every blessing you receive, every ounce of grace, every resource, every truth, is actually a vocation meant for someone else.
What is the blessing currently sitting in your hands, and who is the nation you are meant to pass it to?
That is the defining question of the covenant. Will you hoard it, or will you let it flow?
Thank you for joining us on this incredibly expansive deep dive. Keep exploring the text, stay curious about the world around you, and we'll catch you next time.